And without further ado, let's hear from Liesl. Big thank you for coming today.
It's my pleasure. So as you've heard, my name is Liesl. I have been coding since I was 12 years old, and I've been dreaming about robots since I was about the same age. I was an absolute nerd at school. My orthodontist had me with braces with headgear, like with, the whole straps and elastic bands and everything over my head. So all that happened for me at high school was people threw shit at me, and I kind of retreated into the computer science lab and learned how to code. So I've been loving technology my whole life. I love the ability that it gives you to when I say transform, I've run a lot of companies in my life, but tech is the one area where you can apply a lever to a very, very tightly noted fulcrum and really shift an entire boulder size mountain. You can't do that with any other thing you do in the world. In my career, I've done a lot. Before Akin, I was running a company called Cognio. We were a pure play AI platform. I started it in 2005, right before the AI hype, about 8 years before the AI hype. And I grew that company over an 8-year period, and it was bought by IBM. We became one of the flagship acquisitions for Australian technology. It was not very well publicized because IBM is very careful about PR and publicity, and I'm still not allowed to talk about it. But what I can tell you is that at the time IBM acquired my company, we had about 26,000 developers using my platform, and we were delivering AI services to 2 of the 3 biggest insurance companies in America, 4 giant Asia Pacific banks. We were doing robots. My platform went on to power the NEO deployment that IBM did in the Robonaut deployment. We were doing voice, we were doing metaverse in like 2000, and oh God, long ago. So it was a great company and I really enjoyed running it. Before that, I built a search engine company from Codebase 0. I started it in 2000. So it was, Google was not a household name. AltaVista was the dominant search engine, and I grew that. And we grew across the Asia Pacific region, and I took that company public in 2005. And then before that, I built an education franchise. I was born in Africa, in Zambia, as you've probably heard from my weird accent. I tried to get into computer science at college, and I was told, you can apply if you like, but we don't have any girls in here. So I applied and I didn't get in. But I still kept coding. I kept using technology. So I got started out at medical school, and then I switched and got a psychology degree and some postgrad. And I've always used technology. So I built an education franchise, which I took over 4 African countries in Australia and New Zealand. So 6 countries altogether. And I did that in my 20s. So that's it. I'm an entrepreneur. I've always used technology to do things that I think are important. And Akin is the most important life work I'm doing. Akin is actually a public benefit corporation, so it means we're for profit, but we really we really care about our social impact mission, and we report against that. Akin is working in, I think, the most important problem space left to humanity, and that is our human habitat. It still takes over 25 hours a week to run a human habitat. It's a complex system. It's not a simple turn on the lights or buy me pizza system. It's a complex problem. And that's basically the problem space we're tackling. For the first few years, Akin's primary work was in pioneering and developing a novel approach to artificial intelligence. And when I say novel, I'm not just saying another twist on neural networks. We're using chaos theory, and we've developed a completely orthogonal way of looking at it. The next couple of years we spent in the space industry, and we're still working there. That's where most of our revenue is coming from now. We build advanced robotics and habitat manager systems for NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. And in the last year, we've started doing technology transfer to Earth habitats. So we basically working very closely with people in the disability sector to adapt assistive robots for people's spinal cord injury and to build a home manager for people living with other kinds of disabilities. Before the team goes away, I wanted to meet some fellow SUMO people. Pretty much 100% of the team that's still hung around joined a hackathon that we ran about a year ago with SUMO. And here they are. Say hello, guys. Hello. We've got about, I don't know, 50 people on the call here. And our robot doesn't look like much at the moment, does it? It's all disassembled. I'll show you the This is the world's first sentient, emotionally aware robot for the space industry. And it's a breadboard at the moment, so I probably won't show you much more than that. But yeah, we basically put about half our budget into software development so that it can recognize human emotions and support complex tasks. And the other half has gone into robotics development. And that's being shipped in a few months' time to NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab to be used in their clean room, which is where they manufacture the Mars rovers. And we're working on a bigger project with a couple of big industry partners for lunar base. So that's the short of it. I'm actually going to ask Connor. I've had like one of those 12-hour work days. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think our audience would like to hear about most? I haven't prepared anything, as you can tell.
Oh, that's all right. It's pretty good so far, what you've done off the top of your head. I don't know, just I guess probably as students, just what they could do, how it might relate to them and what they're studying at the moment, and just opportunities for them, I guess.
What are people studying? A combination of hardware and software?
Well, I think we've got people across all of engineering, so yeah, but this is probably a lot of mechatronics in here as well, though.
Fantastic.
But then also, yeah, software, maybe even civil in some way.
Yeah. I think that the key thing I'd like to tell people is that I've noticed, particularly in Australia, we get taught very much to be quite mechanical in how we think about work and our place in the world. We tend to look to be a part of a machine rather than build a machine. It's a very important distinction, something that happened for me quite young, fortunately. And this is this realization that reality itself, it's going to sound really flaky, but reality itself is basically just a bunch of energy waves hanging together in a certain configuration. And you have the ability to decide what your life is going to be like. In Australia, we train to think about getting a job as opposed to building something of significance. And that something of significance is something that you construct in your mind, and then reality follows. It's kind of hard to explain. It's the best. One of the examples I've talked about before is I used to set targets for myself where I wanted, not just like money, but where I wanted my life to be, where I wanted my career to be, that I wanted to live in Australia, not Africa. You know, I had these very, very clear targets. And I then turned those targets into a concrete vision. They were like, I woke up in the morning and I thought about them. And then very importantly, I invested emotional energy as if it had already happened. And most of our lives we get brought up to do, you know, do something secure, stick with what you know, don't count your chickens before they hatch. That's rubbish. It's just absolute bullshit. There's nothing else more important in the world than to imagine what the future is going to be like and then to live it as if it's already happening. And I think that's the most important thing I'd like to convey. So I'll give you one example. I was living in Africa. I knew I wanted to come to Australia. I couldn't get a visa because it was a while ago where they weren't actually valuing skills. And I came out. I had a franchise. My franchise was growing. I had a target of adding 5 franchisees every quarter. So I mean, every quarter I used to get about 100 franchise queries, and I'd select 30, and then I'd filter down and pick the 5 best franchisees. And I knew I wanted to come to Australia, so I basically bought a plane ticket, stuffed cash in my coat, my suitcase, literally, and got on a plane and come out here and opened a bank account and did all of that. And I knew I'd be away for about a month. So this was pre-internet. Well, it was early days of internet. So I'd spent tens of thousands of dollars on a massive advertising campaign in media and television and radio, thinking when I landed back, I get this influx of new queries and I'd basically make the quarterly goal that I'd set in my mind. And then what happened is I got back and there was massive upheaval up north. It was Rwanda, and there was a lot of spillover from a civil war that was happening there. And thousands, tens of thousands of people were just walking, put whatever they owned in their pocket, and they'd walk 5 or 6 months till they got to South Africa. I was born in Zambia, grew up in Zimbabwe, but I was living in South Africa at the time. And so you just had all these desperate, hungry people arriving. And what they were doing was actually getting there. There was no work. So they would take a spade at nighttime and they would go and dig up the cabling, the copper cabling. There was no overhead telephone lines because it would just get stolen. So they would dig 6 feet down and actually dig up copper cable, they'll sell it for scrap metal. Net result was I came back from this Australia trip, I had no phone, no internet. My mobile was an old analog system, nothing happened. So I had this massive ad campaign and all the calls and all the queries were just going nowhere. And it was really interesting time because I had this clear goal of 5 franchisees per quarter and it didn't happen. So I just kept going. I couldn't do anything. It was just frustrating. I kept calling the telco. I did everything I could. Eventually, about 2 weeks before my quarter was up, I paid someone to illegally climb up in a tree and hack together my phone line from an existing telephone cable. I still didn't have the 100 queries though. And a client walked into the door and said, Liesl, you should be on this prime television show called Your Own Business. You know, you should be on it. So I said, you're right, I should be. So I phoned them and emailed them and I said, hey, I should be on your show. And they went, no, you're too small. We've already done an education piece. No, not interested. And a week later, I knew I had to be on there. So a week later, I called them up again and I said, I should be on your show. And the person who'd rejected me the week before was off sick. And the replacement was frantic because she had to put together an entire show with 10 hours notice. And she said, yes, we'll feature you. Can we be there in 2 hours time? And can you round up 30 people? I said, yes. And they were there. That night we were featured, we aired, and I got 150 franchise queries that night and another 50 the next morning. And I closed my 5 for the quarter. So that was the first time I really stopped and thought about this. You know, up until then, I thought it was some magic woo-woo stuff that was happening. I just visualized it and it happened. Turns out there's an entire field of thought around this. So if you read Steve Jobs' biography, which I recommend, I don't like to read a lot of popular literature, but it's a really good book. They talk about his reality distortion field. Okay, where, you know, there's the one anecdote where he walked in, he was testing out the new iPhone and it had a screen, like everyone had this, you know, very good composite plastic screen. He had it in his pocket with his keys. And he walked into the boardroom and he said, threw it down on the table and said, this is no good. My screen is scratched from the keys. It has to be glass. Everyone around the table said, it can't be done. One guy left the room early, got on a plane to Asia, walked into the door of a factory. These guys had built a factory just in case they got an Apple contract. They were like 250 PhDs waiting on standby. And he got his glass screen, which wasn't actually feasible at the time. Now, one could say it's because he's Steve Jobs, but I'm saying it's the other way around. He became Steve Jobs because that's how he moves in the world. Okay, you move in the world in a certain way. You have a certain belief about yourself and about what is going to stick to you and how you're going to be, and reality comes along with you. So I know this is not very software or techie, but what I'm saying is the most important work you can be doing is not applying for 20 jobs or 50 jobs or 100 jobs, or, you know, definitely join SUMO. That's like one of the most important things you can be doing because you're networking. But it's about giving yourself permission to stop and give the best time on your Monday morning or weekend or whatever it's your best thinking time. And don't go dive in and answer emails or, you know, call someone or whatever you're going to do. Use that time and give it to yourself and spend that time seriously meditating on where you want your life to be. 5 years, 2 years, 1 year from now. Not only like I have this much money and I have this house or whatever, but what is your life? That's good. But what does your life feel like? Are you standing up on stage? Are there 1,000 people looking at you going, ooh, ah? Do you have tenure and you're the top professor in your field? Are you in America building advanced, you know, space robots? Are you, you know, what sort of life do you have? What sort of people do you have around you? What does your daily life look like? I have a real problem when I have to fill out these forms of like your secret questions, like what's your ideal job? It's being the CEO of an AI company and I get to do it, you know? So what you do, I've just given away my secret question to a whole big group of engineers. There we go. You know, this is the most important work you're doing for yourself. So it's about having a very clear, a very tangible picture. I then have a vision board. I've made mine into a vision video. that clearly shows these key milestones. I typically have like a couple of anchor things, like I have, what does my family life look like? What does my sort of professional interesting life look like? Not just like money, but I'm doing this kind of work that has this kind of impact. And then there's definitely a wealth or a success component to it as well. And that's just the most important thing you can do. And then the key step to do after that is you have to then invest it with emotions as if you've already done it. That doesn't sound like a big step, but it is really hard to do, okay? Because you're putting yourself out there and you have to get through all of your risk of not achieving what you set out to do. You have to get through the fear. You have to get through 20 years of conditioning. And you're all engineers or studying to be engineers. That means you've either decided to do that, or there's some part of you that likes order, that likes to make sense out of chaos, that likes maybe there's some sort of stability you want in your life. And you have to basically let go of all of that. And you have to think about, this is a means to an end. What is the end? What am I becoming? What am I doing in the world? Why does that matter? When I was living in Silicon Valley, I lived in San Francisco for almost a decade. And I worked my way up to being a mentor and coach at Singularity University. And one of the things that they taught me, they would have this accelerator program every summer. And everyone would come there, and the opening line was this: if what you were doing, let me not express it inversely. When you wake up in the morning, you need to know that what you are doing has the potential to touch 1 billion lives. If it doesn't do that, why are you doing it? The most precious thing you have is your life energy. You cannot get time back. That life energy that's directly correlated to time and task is the thing you have. It's not, whether you grew up on the right side of the railway tracks or, whether you've got this degree or this MBA or whatever. It's what do you devote your time to? And there is no point in waking up and giving your time to something that doesn't matter. Interesting thing is, whenever I've done that, I've made the most money, and it's almost been an accidental side effect. I'm not very wealth oriented, but when I devote myself to something that has the ability to touch lives and add value and change the way people do things in a significant way, you end up with other things following naturally. So a bit of a ramble, but basically that's what I wanted to say. The exercise of clearly visualizing what your life's like, then actually creating a vision board, like literally cut pictures out of a magazine if you have to, or make your desktop, your vision board, make it rich. Okay, I'll tell you an anecdote in a minute of where that can go wrong. Make it rich in terms of like rich media, make it not just one aspect of life, but multiple aspects of life, your social life, your impact on the world, your success, whatever matters to you. And then invest emotions as if you've already succeeded. And that is scarier than it sounds. And you can do it by practicing. It's a skill. So when you're having a shower in the morning, you think about your vision board and you go, fuck, it's awesome walking. Excuse me. It's great walking into this house with the beautiful skylights looking over the Sydney Harbour. It feels so amazing if that's what matters to you, and you invest those emotions, and the rest of the world has no choice but to come along. I'll tell you a story about how I did wrong, and then I'm going to ask for a couple of questions. So an example of when I did it wrong, when I started my search engine company, I was absolutely green. I built this franchise, and I had no idea that a company had shares and that you could chop up the shares and sell them to investors. I just didn't know. I thought you just went to the bank and borrowed some money and you just spent 100% of it in growth, and then every cent of profit you make, you plowed back into growth and marketing. It was a good formula, it really actually worked. But when I started a tech company, I spent quite a lot of time thinking and studying and figuring out what I was going to do. And I figured out you could sell shares. So I thought to myself, my vision board was $20 million. The company was going to birth $20 million and was going to be listable. I thought that was a huge amount of money. Okay. who wouldn't want a company that's worth $20 million and that you could list in the stock exchange? We then went through the most horrendous tech crash. Like you guys were young. It was just awful. The early 2000s was just brutal. It was like crawling around in the desert with blood dribbling out of your ears. And, you'd go to someone for money and they'd say like, didn't you know the internet's dead, and stick with what you know. And it was just horrible. So I went for 3 years without a salary at all. I got some investors and they didn't pay. I had creditors banging on the door shouting, and it was just awful. But 5 years later, I had a company that listed at $25 million value. Okay, but now what's wrong with this picture? It's not a trick question, anyone? Think about what I was saying earlier about the vision board. I didn't think about these other aspects of life. So I had this company worth $25 million, but guess what? My shares were down to 15%. So I wasn't personally worth that, the company was. I found myself surrounded by board members who had no freaking idea what we were doing. We're absolutely misogynistic. I was a coder and an inventor, and they'd say stuff like, you go take care of the marketing, dearie, and us men will take care of the business. I actually got told that by my chairman. So I found myself surrounded with people I didn't enjoy working with, who were de-investing in the technology. I didn't take care of myself in this picture, and I certainly didn't take care of my family and people I loved. They were kind of what was left over on a Saturday at 6 p.m. after I finished a 100-hour work week. So that's an example of a vision and actualization that came true, but at an expense. And you look at a lot of pretty famous wealthy people like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and they have extraordinary success by anyone's measure, but they pretty much have personal lives that you really wouldn't want, So, it's really important that you have something that's sustainable, that sustains you as a human being, and that where you're actually measurably giving back into the world as well. And that was definitely my Cognia journey. So Cognia started out my company after the search company as my cyber twin. The dream was to make a one-click AI that you can sit down and you can say, I'm going to build an AI that does X, Y, Z in ABC environments. It's going to be a robot on the space station. It's going to be a bot in social media that can just take care of all the stuff so I don't have to do it, or it's going to sit and do whatever. And the idea was that you say, this is what it's going to do. Here's the data it sits over, and you go click and it goes live. We never got to one-click AI. The fastest we ever built was, we had someone build one in an hour. It wasn't very good, but it worked. And the fastest enterprise-grade AI we did was in 12 hours flat. What I'm saying is, from the word go, with that company, I was a lot more thoughtful about where I wanted this to end up. So what I wanted out of Cognia is I wanted wealth. I had a very particular house I needed to get, and I have it today. It's the exact house. I wanted my family to be close. I wanted to actually have time for relationships and things I enjoyed. And I wanted this company to be doing something significant in the world. And I'll peel off into that in a minute. And that's where I got. 8 years later, we are now the power of the engine driving Watson across health, across pretty much most of the bots you now talk to in customer support are powered by technology that was built here. We did Robonaut work. We did all sorts of really interesting and influential work. And I actually worked less. The first 5 years, I was working normal business hours, and I delegated sooner. So it was really a much, much nicer way to work. I think one other thing I'll probably tell you about when you're starting any endeavor, whether it's a project that you're doing inside a company or whether it's your own company, don't wait for people to tell you what to do. Just start doing it. Find out or work out what I call valuation drivers. I've never run a company on a classic business plan. You'll go to college, you'll go to do your MBA, and they'll say, oh, business needs people, product plan, blah. No. What you do is you give yourself time and space again. If it's a project inside a company, maybe just a week. In my case, every company I start, I give myself half a year. And it's not easy to buy yourself half a year. In that half a year, I do not commit to an application or a market. I just commit to figuring out where the hell the world is going and how I'm going to build into that. So I look at where society is going. where technology is going, where I think they're going to converge. I meet anyone I can. Like I meet a lot of venture capitalists. They're awesome. Not when you're trying to get money from them, but before, when you say, hey, I'm thinking of something, I just want to listen to you. They're great. I used to go to international conferences. I just hoover everything up. I'd work 80-hour weeks, but I'd just be reading and meeting people and hoovering sucking everything up. And then at some point around the 2 to 4 month mark, it starts percolating in your head. And then you realize this is where it's going to go. So the search engine came to me that way. I realized that the information availability was going like this. And people's time wasn't going like this, it was staying like this. You know, the amount of content that was being published was staggering. What we had at the time was Alta Vista, which was manually organizing everything into indexes. And I decided we need a self-personalizing engine. And we ended up building a system that could look at micro behavior, back infer who you were, and re-rank dynamically. So we're great in mobile environments and multicultural environments. We're actually getting a better click-through rate than Google at the time that I listed that company. With Cognia, yes, I decided search was going to be important. And I went out to build a search engine. And everyone thought we were crazy because they said we've already got Alta Vista. We ended up with about 6 million users, which was pretty decent. But then Google got funded, and I thought I can't compete. So I turned it into a platform that was used by Yahoo globally and Fairfax and others. Same with Cognia. I didn't start out with a business plan. I started out I had a co-founder in Cognia, engineer who worked with me at the last company, and I started out saying 6 months before we commit. And we did it. First couple of months we were going to do something in search because we knew search, you know, we're going to do ad targeting and this and that. And I said, like, we're not allowed to commit. And my co-founder was on a bus in New York. I sent him out to meet some great venture capitalist friends of mine. And he calls me and says, I've got this crazy idea, Liesl. Everyone's chatting on instant messaging, like this is Yahoo chat thing, you know, and everyone's chatting on IM, and we're going to have like versions of ourselves out there in this like metaverse, and you know, and we've got to be able to give people an AI version of themselves and they can chat. And it was great. And you know what our first business model was? Rich people building a version of themselves to talk to people after they died. Like we literally, that was our first investment, a super wealthy guy. We didn't have a business model. Just like search engines did not have a business model when I got into search, but we knew. So stepping back, so I thought, where is society going? Now this time I was thinking about society is going to, we're kind of more lonely than we've ever been, but we're more connected than we've ever been. We're connected in hundreds of ways to people, hundreds of times a day in hundreds of different environments. But we don't have this kind of tribe of 12 people around us like we used to have in caveman days. And so I thought we've got this kind of growing disenchantment, but this deeper need for personalization. We want systems to respond to us as if we're the most important person on the earth. And I just decided that, you know, interactive AI was going to become important. Now it's a gazillion-dollar industry. Amazon's declared itself an AI company, Facebook and Google AI companies, but back then it wasn't. So I decided that society was going a certain direction. You know, we're not a social trends. I decided technology, we hadn't had another wave of AI. We'd gone through an AI winter. And, you know, that's why I started it. Then, so I gave myself that time to think about society and technology. Then again, I gave myself months to think about what are the valuation drivers. Now, what I mean by that, you step back and you think, if this project I'm building or this artifact or this machine or this company, whatever it is you're building is destined to be important in the world, how is it adding value in the world? If you can figure those valuation drivers out, you can make all your decisions around this. What do I build next? Where do I spend my time? Where am I getting the money from? Who do I present this to? And it gives you a really powerful framework. So with Cognia, we decided that the valuation drivers were, obviously we were going to build this one-click AI, so we were democratizing AI. But the valuation drivers, how we measured our time, was mass uptake, fixed problems, actual real problems for people, and really defensible AI, because there wasn't a lot of good AI out there in like 2005. And those were our three core drivers. So someone would come along and say, hey, you know, I want you to build we got this like a AI version of, you know, Harry Potter for blah, blah, blah for an ebook publisher, and here's $1 million. We go like, no, where's the mass uptake? You know, where's the fix a real problem and where's the defensible AI? So it allowed us to really think about our work. It also allowed us to respond to market changes. So for example, in the early days, it was a upcycle in the market. So we were doing mass uptake. We were building chatbots for social media. You know, we had MySpace before Facebook was bundling this in their accounts. We had a couple of big media companies were throwing characters out there. We were doing film characters. We were doing anyone on social media can have a bot, you know, anyone. And it was great. We were just churning out content in the world, but the revenue was really low. Then when 2008 hit, because we had this core idea, we tracked all three of those things at any given time. 2008 hit and it was brutal. There was no money out there for anything. But we'd already figured out how to have a human level rich conversation. So we went to, this is boring as hell, but we thought, what problem can we fix? Well, banks and giant companies had to suddenly slash costs by 30-40%. And they didn't have a way to do this. And we would turn up and say, for, you know, 10 cents a chat, we can give you a human level conversation. You know, that would cost you $5 if you had to pay someone. And so that's where we ended up doing a lot of work. I moved to San Francisco because I wanted to move out of enterprise software. Got really boring after 5 years. They were making enough. And that's because I wanted to pivot back to mass uptake, you know, just before Siri got acquired. Because I thought that was coming. I thought we were going to have talking assistants on our phone. We prototyped a voice box that you could put in your kitchen and talk to it. See some people are leaving already. There we go. I don't know how long I'm supposed to talk for, and I better stop for questions. Don't see any in the chat. So, you know, defensible AI was the other one. We always think is this novel, is this unique, is this doing something for the state of the art? And those key factors, at the point that IBM acquired us, we could have NASDAQ listed if we chose to. I personally wanted to NASDAQ list the company, but my shareholders and founder wanted to be acquired by IBM, and it was a great outcome. I really had a great time working at IBM. They're surprisingly wonderful and good company, you know, very, very methodical, very thoughtful, and really interesting. Akin is a little bit different. So Akin, as I said, is a public benefit corporation. I founded it because I looked at what we were doing in Cognia and what's happening with Amazon and Google and all the big companies in the world. And I realized that this is the most persuasive and influential form of technology ever. If you take a predictive AI analytic engine and you pair it with some form of embodiment, be it a voice or a smart email or whatever, you can persuade people to do anything. Okay. And then I started thinking about the human home, where today I'm a mum and I spend 30 hours a week running my home, and I'm making all these ridiculously bad decisions because I have no time. And I'm handing these decisions over to Google and Amazon. And we end up eating takeaway 3 nights a week and, you know, watching a whole bunch of TV instead of going for a walk with the dog. You know, we're just making all these micro decisions without realizing how much of our life is actually ordered by a bunch of AI systems that are predicting and nudging you in a certain way. And I wanted to build a different world. I want to build a world where that 30 hours a week becomes 10 and we spend the other 20 hours doing stuff we love. And I wanted to build a world where you don't have to spin a lot of cognitive cycles to have a good life. Eat a good meal every day. You live a life that reflects your value system, whether that's the environment or you know, some social impact you're interested in. And that we have an AI that understands those values and goals and empowers us to actually do that. And that's Akin. That's why it's a public benefit corporation. So our valuation drivers are a little bit different. We measure success by how many people are using our technology. We measure success by whether they have a trusted relationship with our system. Do they hand more decisions over to us? Do they actually build a bond with this technology? Which of course places an ethical and moral responsibility on us. And then the third measure of success is, have we changed state? If we give you an AI system that you spend 2 or 3 hours a day with, you know, doing everything from getting you to college to picking who you're going to talk to next on social media to ordering your dinner for you, we need to understand at the end of the week that we've made your life measurably better. And that doesn't mean that you spend 40 hours a week on the platform, which is how current commerce measures success. It doesn't mean you do 50 transactions a day on the platform, which is how the current market measures success. It means, have we measurably shifted your life? If we can change the state of an individual human being, we can then change the state of the family or social group they live in, and we can, by definition, change the society we live in. If we get 10 million people to turn off their lights without even thinking about it, or to eat vegetables that they've grown in their back garden instead of ordering in, we've actually shifted the ecosystem. And that's what we're doing at Akin. So that's our valuation drivers. I've got a question. Advancements in AI set to displace millions of jobs in the sensory. How do we see relationship with work changing over time? How will the value of labor change? There's a lot of questions in that. I'm very glad you didn't do the evil AI is going to take all our jobs thing, because evil technology has been taking human jobs pretty much since we first jumped on the back of a horse and, no longer had to have someone carrying our whatever those things that the emperors rode around in were. Technology's always displaced human labor. I think the relationship with work, we're already seeing this happen. We don't realize it's happening. When my grandma was growing up, she was an artist, but she never did art because she had 5 kids and she spent 60 hours a week, over a wash tub, washing clothes and literally chopping coal for the oven. We have, in a weird way, more leisure time than our grandmothers had because of technology. And in a way, we kind of throwing it against the wall. We spend it watching a lot of, not the people in this room, I'm sure, but reality TV, chasing stupid long tails of junk on social media, burning through more and more long tail experiences to try to give meaning to our life. So I'm a little bit dystopian about that. Somebody who's probably more utopian about his old classic Asimov's The Dawn series, where robots are pretty much doing everything and people just sit around all day and create art and so on. I think the bulk of humanity, if we're given excess time, we just, I don't know, do stupid stuff, So I think our relationship with work, we've just got to do what we're doing in this room. Like, we've got to build the technology that impacts other people. We're just going to become more and more a function of wherever we get put. Like, we put in Australia, whether we came here by choice or not, which means we can choose not to work and still actually eat. So if you want to be part of the side of the world that's actually shaping how that happens, you should be doing what you're doing, which is engineering. You should be careful of being a passive consumer. What I do quite regularly is I log my time. I haven't done it for a while. I need to, I'll actually walk around with a physical notebook, paper, and a pencil, and I'll write down how I spend my day. And it's staggering what you do with your time. So I think more and more we're going to have to be much more aware of our lives. Our human tendency, because we're wired like cavemen, is to sit around a fire scratching fleas and watching someone dance around and amuse us. And we're just going to be having an empty life full of that if we don't think about it. The value of labor, I'm a bit conflicted here because we work very heavily in the disability sector. So I'm talking to an audience of people who have, whether or not you live with disability, you have the ability to go to college and earn a living. But a lot of the people we work with, if you're one of the 1 in 5 Australians who lives with disability, you're likely to only have a 13% employment rate. You're likely to be living on, minimal basic income. And one of the things we're hoping to do at Akin is to help take away dependency on others and give independence so you can get through daily living and feel more actualized. So I think in that sense, technology is helping the future of work. I'm rambling a little bit because I really feel like we're part of the elite, and that's a privileged position to be in. We're not one of the people who's going to lose their jobs in a call center to a robot. You can't stop the tide of technology. What you can do as individuals is make sure that the technology we build is accountable for the outcomes it has in the world. So I'm sorry if I didn't answer that right. Favorite project that Akin has done, upcoming student opportunities. Yeah, we're just crazy busy at the moment. We would love to do another hackathon, another internship. I'm completely and utterly in love with our space robots. Someone, people say to me, what the hell are you doing building space robots? And basically, like, it's paying all our bills, which is quite amazing. I'll just see if I can screen share something we're working on. I can't disclose too much, but We are right now putting together a project where we're basically bringing together some consortium partners to work on advanced habitat management. It's not in the lunar base yet, but we're really looking at what does it look like to have a habitat manager that understands habitat as a complex system. What sort of complex tasks can robots do that they can't do today, whether they ambient thinking AI or a physical embodiment. How does that help with asynchronous communications? So this is a project we're working on right now. It's not real yet. It's real in my head and in the heads of the team that you see out there. And we're making it real. We're pulling in some pretty heavyweight partners, and the money's starting to kind of follow it. And, we haven't got it all yet. We haven't got the team, we haven't got the money, but it's absolutely going to happen. Like, we're going to have Australian AI on the moon. We're probably going to have Hugh Jackman's voice going, "Good day, mate." And it's going to be awesome. So that's a favorite project we're working on now. Another project, though, which I'd really love to share, this only really came after about 1.5 years of work. It's still not live, but I want you to meet Dan. Dan is a peer and project manager. He helps people with rehabilitation. He's a superhuman being. He's an avid skier. Dan was careening. Actually, I won't tell you how, but Dan's in a wheelchair. He's quadriplegic, and we've trying to get funding together to build robots and habitat managers for people living with spinal cord injury. So we've got enough funding to basically rig up a smart home, which is more important than you'd think in a wheelchair. And we're busy working on getting funding for robotic assistance. People with spinal cord injury have to have sometimes care 24 hours a day. Imagine what it would feel like to have someone with you that you don't know, who's paid to be there 24 hours a day. They're putting food in your mouth, they're picking up your phone when you've dropped it on the floor, they're in the toilet with you, they're in the shower with you, they're in the kitchen with you, they're giving you a toasted cheese sandwich when you don't feel like a toasted cheese sandwich. Like, how awful is that? Okay. If you have a robot, you've actually got something that's more like a pet, it's got a role in your life. It's just doing shit for you and you don't have to ask anyone. So that's another project I love that we're doing at the moment. Student opportunities. As I said, we're right in the middle of a massive sprint at the moment. It's going to take us about a month. When we get this quantum crew project together, we'll definitely be looking for more people. And looks like we're going to be getting some funding for the advanced robotics for spinal cord injury, and we'd be probably planning another hackathon to do some project ideation there. Often, what's your favorite project, Akin?
It's definitely the design and build of our robot here, the cake, that you saw in breadboard form. It's been a long time coming, and it's really cool to see something that this is something I tell all engineers is our team touches the entire process from design, testing, building. It comes into the shop, you made it on your computer, and now it's a real part, and then we go off and ship it. So rather than you just focusing on a tiny little piece of the design, we get to touch the whole thing, and it's been really rewarding. So yeah, that's my favorite part, and looking forward to seeing some more hackathons in the future as well.
I just want to go back to that question about AI displacing jobs and work. Ultimately, technology gives us choice, and we don't think about this in our generation. I'm just going to circle back to my grandma a moment. Like, she was living with us when she was old, and I found this artwork in her cupboard, and I said, "Oh my Grandma, why weren't you an artist?" And she said, "Because I had kids and I had no time." And I realized that if I was born just 50 years earlier, I could not, as a woman, I would not have had the choice to be an AI technologist. It just would not have been a path open to me. I would have got to be someone's wife, whether he or was a bastard or not. I would have got to be maybe a secretary for a while until I had babies, and that's it. So in a sense, the fact that somebody invented a freaking dishwasher, which is a kind of a robot, really, it's a machine that does work that human hands used to do. Someone invented a dishwasher, a vacuum cleaner, washing machine, meant that my mother got to go work and got to earn enough so that I could go to college and I get to do what I choose. So ultimately, there is a lot of displacement when there's new technology. People that have a set of skills that are no longer relevant. But ultimately, if you free up human time that is currently engaged in mundane tasks, you are giving people choice. I bet if you ask the 1 in 3 people in the world who are a caregiver, if they feel like spending 20 hours a week washing dishes, mopping floors, changing diapers, making sure their grandma's okay, cooking everyone's meals, nagging everyone to do their laundry, do they want the job? I certainly don't. That's just the area we happen to be working with. So ultimately, by freeing humans up from mundane tasks, you certainly displace a lot of human beings who, you know, like I'm sure when the first tractor came out, the guys who used to walk around with the plow on their shoulder, dragging it through the mud, were really upset. But their grandchildren got to choose not to do that work because of that. And we're bringing that kind of choice, we hope, to people living with disability. And I think certainly the broad trend line is to do that with anyone. Just a point on gender while I'm here, you know, we still don't have, the women in this room, we don't have as much choice as blokes. You know, we will only get 2.8% of the venture funding as we speak. So when I go out to raise money for a space project, it's like I'm standing in line behind 50 blokes. They all get to go in and pitch before me. And even if I won the money, I get about half the guys do. But at least I get to do this. The next generation, though, if technology frees me up from that 20 hours a week, you know, again, we get to do more. I'm sounding a bit shitty there because I've been capital raising for a couple of months and I'm over it at the moment. But, you know, ultimately it gives choice. If we get to choose how we spend our time, let's hope we don't spend it watching reality TV. Let's hope we spend it in mindful and meaningful ways.
All right. Does anyone else have any other questions to ask Liesl or the team in general?
How did I keep up with coding along with completing my degrees? I basically triage. Like what I typically do is get very involved in the fun bits that I really like, which is the early days when you've got a whiteboard and you're thinking about the core approach and core architecture. I'm not a good coder. My code is full of bugs. So I typically hire people and hand over to them at that point. I just worked crazy hours. You know, when I was your age, I was a refugee from Zimbabwe and we had no money. Money all got frozen in Zimbabwe. So I was, when I was at medical school, I was at medical school from 5 in the so I catch a bus at 5 in the morning. And I'd be in medical school from 8 to 5, and then I'd get straight in a bus to go to work, and I work at a restaurant till 1, and then I'd do my homework till, this was crazy, like I get 4 or 5 hours sleep. And then when I was growing my franchise, it was the same. I had small children, so you know I was literally putting my kids to bed at 8 and then working till 3. You can't keep that up forever though. So again, it's about, you know, I've got this PhD that I started and never finished, and I'm sad about that. But I kind of look at it and think, do I want to write a thesis that maybe 20 people are going to read, or do I want to build a technology that 100 million people are going to use? So I just have to triage the time. Book recommendations. Steve Jobs, as I mentioned. You know, this thing I talked about the reality distortion. There's a couple of books out about that. I'd read those. One I read in the early days was called Mind Power by a guy called John Kehoe. It's a little bit American, so it's a bit like rah, 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 but it's, you know, it's quite practical. I really enjoyed Sapiens. Noam, whatever his surname is, Sapiens. That was all the rage in Silicon Valley when I left. That was great. I've read every freaking science fiction book there is, and I'm really plumbing the bottom of the barrel there. So if you haven't discovered Ian Banks, read him. He's fantastic. He's a bit harrowing at times. I'd have to rank my favorite science fiction authors because I've got too many. Yes, the Corsican Saga. It's a bit of an oldie, but they're fantastic as well. That's with Louise McMaster Bujold. She's great. Okay. No other chat questions, any other voice questions that anyone has? I haven't heard anything from the ladies in the room except, oh, there's Joan and Kay. All right. Well, Connor, I'm not sure if you want to wait for any more questions or what you'd like me to do. I mean, I basically, yeah, as I said, the final message in all of this is that your 20s don't come back. If you want to raise money for a company and you want to go to San Francisco to do it, by the time you're 30, you're over the freaking hill. You're too set in your ways. You're more likely to raise money as a 21-year-old than a 28-year-old. Sounds crazy. That's the way it is there. San Francisco is not the same as it used to be. It's apparently been a bit decimated, but it might come back. But this is the time where you're able to you're not locked in how the world ought to look. You live in the world of probabilities and possibilities. And the longer you can hold on to that as a human being, the better. So that's my closing line. Live life as a probability matrix and know exactly what the endpoint of that probability matrix looks like, and you will get there.
All right, perfect. Thanks very much for that. Thanks so much for giving up your time, especially after a 12-hour day, I think you said. So we really appreciate it. It's great to hear from someone as experienced as you, and it's just very inspirational hearing everything you've done, and you're right at the cutting edge. So hopefully it was very useful for everyone in this room. And yeah, thanks everyone for coming. We'll hope to see you all next week.